Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Can y'all eat and sing at the same time?
We could gargle.
Okay. Gail, our wonderful, amazing church secretary, brought these treats again. She did it a few months ago, and she's doing it again. She just wanted to treat y'all this morning. So,
Amish Bakery, probably? Amish Bakery,
the
probably?
Amish Bakery, yes. Yes. Gail's part Amish, I forgot to tell y'all. So, just joking. Okay. All right, we're going to sing because that is a blessing. That's a blessing. Let's sing this morning. When a life lost billows you are tempest tossed, when you are discouraged thinking all is lost, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God has done. Are you ever burdened with a load of care? Does the cross seem heavy you are called to bear? Count your many blessings, every doubt will fly, and you will be singing as the days go by. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God has done. So amid the conflict, whether great or small, do not be discouraged, God is over all. Count your many blessings, angels will attend, help and comfort give you to your journey's end. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God has done. Yeah. I was practicing with Courtney when we got to that slow part at the chorus. She was like, "What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?" She's just playing away. I said, "No, we're going to slow it down." All right. All right. So, I have our trivia question today. I wasn't sure how to pronounce this word, so I wrote it on here.
What is it? I'll tell you. Polydactyl? Oh, polydactyl.
Webbed fingers or toes?
It's close. Joe?
That is the bird that goes along with the pterodactyl.
Nope.
It sounded smart.
Linda?
Six toes.
Yes. It is the presence of 6 or more toes on one foot or 6 or more fingers on one hand. Now, the trivia question today is this.
Ernest Hemingway.
Ernest Hemingway, yes, you won. So, every year, out of 1,000 babies, what's the percentage of how many of those babies has this? How many in 1,000? How many in 1,000? Karen? Close.
What did she say?
She said 2.
5.
Brenda?
3.
Nope.
Actually, my
Debbie?
7.
Nope. Angelique? Rudy?
1.
She said 1, 2. I'm going to give it to Karen because it was 1.7. 1.7. Out of 1,000 babies.
Involved in it.
Yes. Donna. You got a wild group today because they got food in front of them.
Sugar high or something. All right. Good morning,
All right, y'all
everybody.
listen up.
Good morning.
Oh, sorry.
You're dangerous with that thing. Okay. This is called, and that's how the fight started. My wife was standing looking in the bedroom mirror. She was not happy with what she saw and said to me, "I feel horrible. I look old, fat, and ugly. I really need you to pay me a compliment." I replied, "Your eyesight is darn near perfect." One year, I decided to buy my mother-in-law a cemetery plot as a Christmas gift. The next year, I didn't buy her a gift. When she asked me why, I replied, "Well, you still haven't used the gift I bought you last year." Okay. The man gives his wife the perfect anniversary gift. Some of these jokes y'all have already heard, but over the years, Rick was constantly getting in trouble with his wife. He could never seem to remember his wife's birthday, their anniversaries, and to top it all, he never got her anything that she liked. His wife, having the patience of a saint, took it in stride and tried not to hold it against her husband too much. This year, Rick managed to forget all about their wedding anniversary, and even worse, he went on with a drinking with his friends and buddies the night before. Stumbling through the doorway at 3 a.m, Rick came face to face with the woman he had married, and she was not a happy camper. "Rick," she scolded, "I put up with this long enough. You know what tomorrow is." Rick, whose mind was still a little cloudy from the booze, asked, "Wednesday?" "Tomorrow's our anniversary," said his wife. "I'm letting you know because if you don't take it seriously and if you don't get me a gift that shows how much this marriage and I mean to you, it's over." "Of course, darling. What would you like as a present? Anything, just name it." The wife thought about it for a moment before she said, "We've been married for 35 years. I've born and raised our 5 children and put aside the possibility of me having a career so that I could be a loving wife. Therefore, I like something nice this year." "Like what?" said Rick. "I need something that will go to 0 to 200 in 6 seconds. You can park it in the driveway." The next morning, his wife woke up and her anger towards her husband had cooled a little bit. When she went outside to get the paper, she didn't really expect a new car to be sitting in the driveway. However, glanced from the front porch, she saw a small wrapped package with a bow. She scooped it up, read the accompanying card. "Sweetheart," it reads, "this is guaranteed to go even faster than 0 to 200 in 6 seconds. Unwrapping the package, the wife discovered a bathroom scale. Rick is scheduled to be buried Saturday. Okay. It's easy to judge. It's more difficult to understand. Understand requires compassion, patience, and willingness to believe that good hearts sometimes choose poor methods. Though judging we separate, through understanding we grow.
Good morning. I always look forward to Wednesdays. Even when I have a long day on Tuesday, it's okay because I get to go home and relax and get up 4 hours later on Wednesday morning than I do on Tuesday. It's actually 5 hours.
So you take off on Wednesday, or?
Oh, yes.
Do you-
Yeah, well, because I'd have to be there now.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because I open.
We appreciate that.
You're welcome. I appreciate it. So we're in Matthew 5. Matthew 5. How many of you have done extensive studies on like the Sermon on the Mount, like you've gone through it several times? Like in church or in a Bible study or something? Many of you, Angelique? Several. I don't know how many times I've been through this. I know Steve said that they did the Beatitudes in your small group.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So this is something I've been through so many different times, and you hear different takes on it, different angles. And it's funny because going through it, a lot of these hit in a different way as I got older. Okay? So like when I was a kid, it would hit me one way, and then as you get older, you start to get more world weary, you start to understand things a little better, and you gain more experience. When you examine some of the ways that these are applied, it becomes far broader and a lot richer. It's almost like, people talk about like a fine wine gets better with age, certain cheeses get better, cured meats with age. It's like that. Things just kind of get richer and tastier when you, digest it with age. What'd you say?
I said, we all get better with age.
Well, I don't know. Some people are like spoiled milk. They just kind of. Yeah. No, please don't. But yeah, we're in Matthew 5. So we're going to get into some. This is sort of like they're almost like parables. A lot of these, but they're comparisons. Okay. Jesus is going to take things and he's going to go deeper. What I want you to remember. Who is he speaking to? Who is the audience that his words are being conveyed to?
It says crowds,
And who were in the crowds?
the disciples.
And who were the disciples? Where are they from?
Everyday people.
Everyday people. What typically would we call them?
Locals.
Locals. Specifically, they have one thing in common.
Followers.
They're all sinners. They're Jews. When you think of these people, don't think of these people as Americans. Don't think of them as 20th century individuals. These are first century Jews. Some of the words in here don't make sense to us in our context. That's okay. A lot of things in Scripture don't make sense to us in our context. That's okay. So we have to remember to put them in a certain context. When we read them, we can't just say, oh, that doesn't make any sense to me, or why would we do that? Because again, he's not speaking to you as a 21st century white American. He's not. These words, if they were not recorded by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and put them in gospel form, the first century church wouldn't have read this. So a Gentile at that time would not have known the exact words of Jesus. We thankfully have them. But again, they're not specific to you. So we have to put them in a certain lens and examine them through that lens. It's not an interpretive lens. It is a contextual lens. Okay? So just keeping in mind with that, all right? Can someone read Matthew 5, 13 through 16?
You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. You want 16 too?
Yes, please.
In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven.
Okay. Again, this is Hebrew duality. Remember, he's saying one thing and then he's repeating it again for extra emphasis. He's saying the exact same thing in two different ways, okay? Now, remembering what I said about context. When we think of salt, what do we think of? Seasoning, and it does what when it seasons?
It makes things taste better.
Preserved.
Tastes better. Ah, preserves. Perfect. Thank you, Karen. That's actually where I wasn't going to go there yet, but yes, preserves. So
She gets a prize.
she gets a prize, yeah. So when we think of salt, we typically just think of seasoning, okay? And seasoning just makes things taste better. That doesn't mean if you taste something and it's not seasoned, you're going to chuck it. If I did that, all of my mother's cooking as a kid would have been in the trash. Trust me, talk to my mom. I taught her how to cook. Yeah. So I learned how to season. I said, hey, Mom, we could add these things. I don't like salt. And now what does she do? Oh, I put a little bit on there. Oh, thank you, Mom.
Hey, Russell,
Yeah.
we know your mom.
I know, that's what I'm saying. You can actually ask her directly.
Be careful.
But yeah, so in our context, salt typically just seasons something, make it taste better. However, we also have the idea that salt preserves. When you have a can of something, it is full of sodium, salt. Sodium bicarbonate is also another one, a relative salt that's able to preserve things. These are preservatives. Now, when you think of salt of the earth, what does that make you think of? Don't think of salt on the earth. When you think of people being the salt of the earth, what does that mean?
Somebody that makes the world better.
Who said it over here? How?
I just followed
Been here a long time.
Okay. So who is he speaking to specifically?
that. By teaching and passing it on down.
And who are the people that are teaching and passing it down?
The prophets, the elders,
And who are they teaching it to?
the children. young
And the children are specifically what?
Jews.
Jews. So, if I live in a pagan nation in, say I'm a Roman, okay? And I'm around the time of Jesus, all right, right in that first century, that first 50 years of the first century there. Am I salt of the earth as a Roman citizen? Again, I have no contact with Jesus, know nothing about it. Am I salt of the earth? Am I salt of the earth?
It's a trick question.
Why am I the salt of the earth as a Roman citizen? What am I doing to the earth?
Seasoning it?
If I'm a Roman citizen, okay, how would I season the earth and preserve the earth? How? What would I be doing?
Following the laws of the ruler.
Okay. Now, does that please God? If I just follow the laws of the ruler, can I be reconciled to God? Okay. Jesus is speaking to Jews. What does the law do for the Jews?
It rolls their sins back, doesn't it?
You're on the right track. It doesn't roll them back. What does it do for the Jew? I'm a Jew.
Yeah.
I live on the earth. The earth is full of the three-letter word, sin. Okay? I'm on the world, so therefore I'm sinful. Okay? I'm going to sin. Here's God. He's holy and perfect and righteous. Can I, in my sinful state, touch God and be one with God? No. So God gives the what? The other three-letter word, the law. And what does that do for me in my sinful
It
state
tells you what sin is.
and God in his holy state? Doesn't just tell me, what does it do then?
Brings you into alignment.
Brings me into alignment. It reconciles me with God.
Another prize.
What was that word that we talked about a couple weeks ago, Ed? That you looked up? You looked up that word. Righteous. Righteous.
Man, that was a couple weeks ago.
I know, I can't remember.
When I was going through this, I was like, yeah, Ed had it. He'll remember. Righteous. When you follow the law, I don't mean you. Jesus is talking to people who, when they follow the law, become reconciled to God. by following the law. Think of food in that day and age that has not been salted. After a long period of time, can I go back to that ham after 6 weeks and it hasn't been salted? It's rancid. It hasn't been preserved. If I now have properly seasoned and salted it, I'm not just going to throw away the ham. I can go to it and do what?
Well, Jews wouldn't eat ham, so.
Right. That's fair. Thank you. I'm thinking of specifically back then people would hang a ham and they could just cut it. Specifically a story I was told when I was a kid where his father just hung the ham and would go and cut pieces off for a long period of time because it was salted, seasoned. Think of God and the world. When the world became full of sin in the beginning, what did he do with it? He destroyed it. Why?
Because it wasn't good for anything.
Because it wasn't good for anything.
Right.
It had gone, right, it had rotted. The world that he made, sin was introduced into it, and it had now rotted. From the outside in. Had just been utterly rotted. And he only found one man in his family that were able to be saved. They couldn't even preserve the earth. Okay? Now, thinking of that, when he tells these individuals that are under the law, that should be following the law, that they're salt of the earth, what do the Jews do for the world? The Jews specifically in that time, what are they doing for the world?
Be an example.
Being an example, what else? Think of what salt then would do. Preserved. So if there's salt on the earth, and before it didn't have salt and I threw it away, what do I still do with that?
You mean they're preserving their earth?
Right. Why? What does
Why?
that do? I'm God, and the earth now has salt on it. What does that mean for me? Am I just going to throw it away?
Oh no, because it's preserved, so
It's still
you're gonna eat
preserved. It's still good to
Future generation.
eat. When Jesus says this, he's not saying that you're the salt of the world and you go out and you're sprinkled about. What he's telling the people who are supposed to be following the law is that you make the world edible to God so that he just doesn't throw it away. And then he says if that salt loses its flavor, remember these are Jews, and they lose their ability to then preserve or make tasty the earth, it's no good to be what? Thrown away. Useless. What he's saying here is the people have gone to a point where they're no longer salty. And God has to take that thing and he just does away with it. God here, through Jesus, is talking about making new salt for the earth. And that new salt is us.
The
Us.
Gentiles?
Yes.
The Gentiles?
Because we receive him. The Jews reject him. They were to be the salt of the earth. They've become tasteless. They weren't converting the nations to follow God. They stuck to their little place and they weren't spreading. In the next little paragraph there, when it talks about light, what were they now supposed to have been doing?
Disciple.
Being a light to the world. So what does that mean when you're a light to the world? If I'm a light, think about like a lighthouse. What does that lighthouse do?
It spreads so people can see the light and not get in the danger.
Not get in the danger. What happens if I'm in the danger without the light?
You're gonna die.
You're gonna die. You're gonna die.
Yes.
I think about there's. Does anyone know about Onesimus House? It's further down in Chesapeake. Ed, do you know about Onesimus House? Pat, if you ever talk to Pat, Pat knows about Onesimus House. It's in a deep part of Chesapeake. I don't know where. But in such a place, there are no streetlights. The only lights are on houses. And if you're driving at night like 9 o'clock and you turn off your headlights, guess what you see? A whole lot of nothing. You see the sky in a silhouette. It's very, very dark. And if I do that and turn off my headlights and I'm coming to a curve, I'm in the danger. And if I continue in the danger without a light, I die. When these people are to be a light of the world, just like when John talks about, or earlier in Matthew when it talks about the light has shined to the Gentiles, Jews were supposed to be the salt of the earth that preserved it for God to keep it and not get rid of it. They were supposed to stay his holy nation through Jesus. And in doing so, they were to be a light to the world that shines so that everyone said, their God is real. Their God exists. And he's holy. Let's know how to be reconciled to him. And they didn't do it. What did they do? He says, you don't take the light and do what?
Hide it.
Hide it. Hide it. How do we, as Christians, do exactly what those Jews did? By becoming tasteless and hiding the light. Give me some examples of things that we do. You don't necessarily have to be doing them. What are some things as Christians that we do?
Not helping someone in need.
No, the opposite. When we hide the light and when we become tasteless as salt. Give me some things that we
Not
do.
sharing the gospel. That's what I just said.
Right? Not sharing the gospel. What else?
Denying Christ.
How do we deny Christ?
When you don't show your faith in outward actions, it's a way of denying him.
That's really good. When you don't show your faith through outer actions, it's a form of denying him.
Right.
How else? How else do we become tasteless and hide that light?
Not
Being
letting
quiet when we should speak.
Being quiet when we should speak. What'd you say about your neighbors?
I said not loving our neighbors.
Not loving our neighbors.
Going along with the crowd.
Going along with the crowd. Think of something we talked about last week. What's something that we actually do that hides our light? That kind of makes us tasteless to God. And I mean, you could say is tasteless. What's something that we do?
Anything for gossip.
Okay, gossip. How about this? How about this?
Pointing your finger.
Yeah.
What that?
Judging.
Judging.
I want to ask you, if we're supposed to be like Jesus, how many times do you see Jesus do this? Well, he does do it. Who does he do it to?
Sinners.
Pharisees. Wait a minute, Pharisees, but they're not people that we normally would point fingers to. They're supposed to be people who are in the law following it. But what has happened to them? They've become tasteless. Jesus only does this to the people who are supposed to be like this when they're tasteless and they're hiding that light. They're saying, I've got it all figured out. I'm righteous. I'm so perfect that I don't have to worry about anything else. Look, I'm not going to worry about you. I'm just going to poke my finger at you. I'm going to be the man who stands in the temple and says, oh, Lord, I am not like this wretched sinner over here. I'm not like this tax collector. I give my tithe. I go to church on Sundays and Wednesday mornings and listen to Russell, and yes, the back of my eyelids, I use them a lot during that time. But oh, when I drive home, I listen to the Jesus music, and I go home and I pray all the time and read my Bible. Sure, I don't help people that ask me, but that doesn't matter. I'm doing the things I'm supposed to do, right? I'm writing the right amount on my checks, right? But I'm not like those other people. All those other people that are out there and doing the horrible things. Oh no, I'm not like them. That's Pharisaical. Do you think Jesus is okay with that?
Yeah.
Or would you rather think that Jesus wants you sitting in the corner, looking at the dirt, thinking about what you've done this week and saying, I am not holy enough to even look at you. And the only holiness that I have is totally derived from you and not me. That's the essence of these words. When then he goes on to say, where is it? Your light must shine before people in a way that they see your good works and praise your Father in heaven. They're not supposed to look at you and say, oh, that's a terrible person. I don't want to be like them. I don't wonder what church they go to. I don't want to go there. Instead, they're supposed to look at you and say, wow, maybe there's something to that person. Maybe there's something that's different about them. I want to get to know them. That's interesting. That doesn't mean that I shove Jesus in their face. That doesn't mean I say, hey, are you a believer? Oh, you got to be a believer. Oh, you have to have Jesus. You know you're a sinner. You shouldn't be going to the club every night. Instead, I could engage them in conversation as I do at work. Think about that. Instead of this, you do this. Instead of poking people in the chest, you pat them on the back. You hug them. You don't have to agree with what they do. Jesus doesn't agree with a prostitute who washes his feet, but he loves her. Because she's the one going, I'm a sinner, and I need you. Just because we have the Spirit doesn't mean we shouldn't do that. These people had the law. And Jesus is saying, you need to do that. I think we ought to think about that. Not deriding yourself all the time, but recognizing where your holiness comes from. It's not from things that you think that you do, or everything that you write in a check, or how many times you go to church. I went to church all the time as a kid. That didn't mean anything. Nothing, because I fell off the wagon, went off the trail, did my own thing. Then takes me recognizing that to come back and say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, even though I had the Spirit. Mocking and deridingly, we have to recognize that. Just as they recognize these things, to them, we have to recognize that as Christians. Does anyone have anything else for that?
You know, the big thing that I'm thinking about quite a bit here is the Jews, they got to be so self-righteous and so whatever that God actually went to the Gentiles because basically they rejected Christ, of course. But you're right, they put themselves in such a high and mighty thing that they weren't no good to nobody but themselves, so to speak. But the Gentiles humbly accepted Christ because I'm worn, my spirit is really terrible, my sin is terrible. They were so humble that they accepted Christ because they needed Christ. But the Jews, they just got to the point where they weren't no good to nobody but themselves. So self-righteous.
Right. You know, Christianity spread not among people of wealth, but among people who are poverty-stricken. That's how Christianity exploded in the Roman Empire. Was they said, oh my gosh, even in your poverty, you're going to help me? You're going to do that? It's just unforeseen. And so people who were poverty-stricken, people who were downtrodden, people who were sinners, as we would call them and have been, they were the people that accepted Christ and said, I want to follow you. I'm going to follow your law. All these pagan things, that can't be real. It hasn't done me any good. I recognize the dire situation I'm in sin. Not rich people. Not people with money. When he comes, these people think that, oh, wealth is what, you're blessed because you have so much wealth, and that brings about what you're talking about. That, oh, well, I'm perfect. I do all what I'm supposed to do, right? And then Jesus says to that rich man, what? One thing you lack. Sell what you have, give to the poor. And the guy can't do it because he had much wealth, or one of them says many possessions. And he goes away sad. I don't think we ought to be like that. We shouldn't be like that. So let's go on the next part.
Russell, I just want to say
Yes,
one
please.
thing. You sure got a lot out of those 3 verses.
Woo! Like I said, I don't come in here meaning to end up preaching, but I think sometimes when we look at Scripture, Paul takes one verse and expounds upon it for chapters, I think that's because we kind of look at something and go, oh yeah, we should be a light to the world. That's great, that's interesting. And then it doesn't mean anything. It's supposed to mean something. if they wrote it down here, it's supposed to be used for something. Yeah. So, can I get someone for verse 17 through verse 19?
Do not think that I come to abolish the law of the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Anyone who breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven, but whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven.
Now, thinking about everything we just talked about, salt and light. Again, the law is something kind of foreign to us, except we have something called the law. The law here does what? Traffic law does what? What is its intention? Not to produce money, but to what?
Keep us safe.
Keep us safe. It's meant to keep us safe. Yes, there are other benefits, it helps fund different things. But it keeps us safe. What did the law do for them? The Mosaic law. Kept them safe. How? How did it keep them safe? In what way did it keep them safe?
Well, for instance, there was laws about eating meat.
Right.
So they wouldn't eat meat that was like pork that wasn't preserved.
Contaminated, right. So it kept them physically. How else? Oh, okay. How else did the law keep them safe?
By marriage, not marrying someone outside of your tribe or Gentile. So it kept the...
Thinking of marriage, I'd like that you made that point. What else does marriage do? If you only marry once and you stay married your entire life, what does that also do for you?
Lord have mercy.
Think
Don't ask Karen.
Hey, how about that? 30 years.
Is that the wife's? Is it written on the back of the mirror and that's the Lord him your husband bragging you? Oh Lord. But if you're married to one person and that's the only person you've been with your entire life, what does that get rid of? 100%.
temptation.
No, temptation still exists.
Yeah.
Thinking about.
You won't get a disease.
You won't get a disease. We think of things oftentimes. Right. Wow. Imagine if everybody in the world only ever used marriage the way it was intended, or sex the way it was intended, and one time and stayed married, and if they divorced, then they never got remarried and never had sex again, we wouldn't have what?
Venereal
Venereal
disease.
diseases. God just doesn't do things spiritually, He does things physically in the law. He kept them safe. Did you know that pork carries trichinosis?
Yes.
And it's not carried in beef. Or if it is, it's very, very rare. In fact, did you know that they couldn't eat rabbits? And they couldn't eat rabbits because rabbits have a little, and I can't think of the name of it, a little digestive organ right at the end of their colon that then reprocesses food, but there's fecal matter in it. So when they eat the meat, it could be contaminated. God kept them only eating specific foods.
Right.
Don't eat predatory animals because they feast on dead things.
Yeah.
Right? God just doesn't keep people holy through the law. He kept them physically well. Okay? And in physically well, they would also be physically holy. Now, when Jesus says, you shall not teach anyone to disobey these things, not a jot or a tittle shall be done away with until all is fulfilled. What is he talking about, the difference between abolish and fulfilled here? What does that mean? How about this? Can I fulfill traffic law? Am I able to fulfill it?
Well, aren't you fulfilling it when you obey it?
But I'm obeying it. Is traffic law ever really completed?
Oh, no.
No, so it's not fulfilled.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, what does that mean? I mean, I could abolish traffic law. I mean, that'd be wonderful.
I think it's already been done.
Right, yeah, in some ways, yeah.
But
Yeah, the laws, flippant administration, yeah. But there's a difference between now, abolish, and fulfill. What is he talking about here? We know the law he's talking about is not our law. He's talking about the holy Mosaic law, okay? God's law. Yes?
He's talking about his death and resurrection. With it, he's filling all the prophecy, he's completing all of it with his death and resurrection.
What does that do? Why is he saying that it doesn't pass away until it's fulfilled? Why wouldn't he just abolish it with his death and resurrection?
I'm not quite getting.
Does it have something to do with God giving you free will?
It's more like this, okay?
Give
When
us a
they wrote these laws, okay, the intention, as we stated, was to keep you physically safe, all right, traffic law. God wrote those laws not only to keep you physically safe, but to keep you physically holy. Not just to keep you spiritually safe, but to be spiritually holy. Not only to keep you mentally safe, but be mentally holy, okay? If you are totally holy by following the law, you are what? Ed?
Righteous.
Righteous!
You do that one word.
You are righteous, and when you're righteous, you are reconciled with God. Now, if Jesus doesn't come to abolish, but to fulfill, why does he fulfill instead of abolish? Can I, by following the law, by myself, be reconciled to God?
No.
No! Why? Why can't I be reconciled? I'm following it, Ed. Why can't I mean, I make the sacrifice when I make a mistake. Why can't I fulfill the law, Ed?
Because you're not righteous.
Well, how is it impossible? You're saying it's impossible. How? Why? Why is it impossible?
Because without Jesus,
Because we're not righteous.
Why do I need Jesus to fulfill it?
Hey,
if
Russell.
you want to get close to God, you have to go through Jesus.
Why do I have to go through Jesus
Because
instead of
he
just
is God's
following the law?
son. And he's fulfilling every prophecy.
But when he fulfills the law, what's the difference between him fulfilling the law and me making sacrifices because I made mistakes under the law?
We're just following the law.
Say it.
He's perfect.
Am I not perfect? I made sacrifices to cover my sin.
You're making this
Oh,
hard.
but I'm not sinless. So wait a minute. If I can follow the law to be reconciled to God, I still need sacrifices to cover my sin. So God can't abolish this law. He's not just going to wipe it away because it's still a prerequisite contract, a covenant. He's made this covenant with me. I've signed the contract. Okay, I'm a Jew, so I've signed that contract. I'm now under that law. I can't fulfill that law. I'm human. I still make mistakes and then require sacrifices. Jesus doesn't wipe away the law because he would just annul the contract, and that's illegal. It has to be fulfilled. And the contractual obligation of the one in the contract, God does his part, we have to do our part. Can we do our part by ourselves? No. Jesus comes, and he doesn't just wipe away the contract, he fulfills it. And why does he fulfill it?
Because he's the
Because we
ultimate
can't.
sacrifice.
Because he is the ultimate sacrifice. His death and resurrection is taking your hand away from the pen, signing that contract, and instead you sign a contract with Jesus. So all those laws and regulations, I'll get to you in a moment, all those laws and regulations that he followed perfectly that you can't, he's completed that contract. Hence, when we talk about the second covenant, that's with Christ. That new contract, when we become a baptized and immersed believer, immersed into his death and resurrection, as you stated, when we come up, we have signed that contract with Jesus. And now he's the one who becomes our fulfillment, because we can't do that.
Okay, let me sum it all up. All the demands of holiness have been met through Jesus Christ. God hates sin. But Jesus Christ met all the demands of holiness. And God is satisfied with his ultimate sacrifice for sin. There had to be a penalty for sin. Jesus Christ was the atonement. He was the one that paid the ultimate sacrifice. And he's at liberty to forgive any of those who come to him and for salvation.
I have an interesting question, theological question. Does Jesus atone for sin?
Yes.
What is an atonement?
It's paying the price for the sin. Sin has to be, the price has to be paid for sin.
When a sheep was sacrificed, it atoned sin. What did its blood do?
What did what?
What did the blood of an innocent
covered
lamb
the sins.
covered? Covered. What can the blood of sheep and lambs not do?
Can't wash away.
Can't wash it away. So that sheep, that sheep is an atonement, because instead of my black sin, the blood covers it, and God says, oh, that's a perfect sacrifice. That's acceptable. I don't see your sin. So does Jesus atone for sin?
Well,
He washes it away. Is that atonement?
He's the propitiation.
Propitiation. That word, I know it's a big, funny, complicated word. Propitiate means that Jesus, instead of us needing some blood to cover our sin, Jesus wipes the sin away and then stands in the place of our sin as a sacrifice. Our sin doesn't exist there anymore. It's not there. As stated, it is sent to the bottomless pit of the sea, as far as the east is from the west. God remembers it no more, because instead of our sin being there, he sees his Son. Jesus does not atone for sin. He doesn't cover it. He washes it away and stands in the place of it. He is he's the punishment. He gets it all. Isaiah 53. He's perfect. He takes it all. By his stripes we are healed. He takes the sin of the world upon himself. He doesn't just cover it. I don't want to hear people say, Jesus atoned for my sin. That is lessening the blood of Christ and making it just like the blood of a lamb. It's not. It is perfect blood. Blood of God and man in one, that perfectly cleans the slate for us that we can't do, fulfilling that law.
Okay.
When you go about in your Christian walk every single day, I don't want you to sit there and think about, I just need to do this and need to do this. Just think about everything that you've ever read in Scripture about the right way to live, and just do that. Living in prayer. In this moment, God, guide me. Spirit, God, take me what I need to do. Tell me that. How should I react in this situation? And the more that you do that in those situations that even seem so trivial, the more that you say, guide me. And you think about those scriptures. The more you do that, the more you won't even have to do that, because you live in that. And then your reactions become holy like God. And that's how you live, and you then become the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Joe.
Okay, I'm sorry now. The 2 Corinthians 5:21 sums a lot of this up to it. It says, God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. That's the great exchange. Jesus exchanges his righteousness for our sin, and we exchange our sin for his righteousness. Now, when we trust in Christ, we make an exchange, our sin for his righteousness. Our sin was poured into Christ at crucifixion. His righteousness is poured into us at our conversion. All right. This is what Christians mean by Christ's atonement for sin. In the world, bartering works only when two people exchange goods of relatively equal value. But God offers a trade his righteousness for our sins, which is immeasurable worth.
Right, that's that
Yeah.
propitiation, the
Yeah.
replacement.
It's the great exchange.
Right. Does anyone have anything else?
We still have to ask for forgiveness.
Absolutely.
Well, sure.
Yeah, we can't think that, it says that, and all your sins will be forgiven because Christ died for you. We have to ask for
Well, confess your sins, and he's
Yeah.
faithful and just
it. Yeah.
to forgive us our sins and cleanse us of all righteousness.
If you believe in your heart, you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, that's a good scripture. for
Right.
Jesus.
Does anyone have anything else for that?
I do, nothing biblical, this is just a little trivia. You know what you said about the pork and the, say that word again? Trichinosis?
Trichinosis, yeah.
When I was a kid, every time my mother fixed pork, we had to eat applesauce because it counteracted the trichinosis.
That's my mom. We always had applesauce whenever we had pork chops.
But you're a Midwesterner, right?
No, I grew up in the north in New Hampshire.
You grew up where?
In New Hampshire.
Oh, okay, you're
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
we
you're
had
a
spaghetti.
Yankee. I'm a Yankee.
Yeah.
What was that word before?
Yeah.
Trichinosis.
That's where trigonometry comes from.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
That's 4 o'clock.
That's so funny. He thinks every time we have ham.
But you know what? When we had bacon, we didn't.